Chelsea doesn't move when the doors open. 6 men walk in first, scanning the lobby like it owes them something. Then him, Youngie Cho. Every head in the room turns except hers. A waiter fumbles a tray near the entrance, and one of Youngie's men snaps something sharp at him in Korean. The waiter's hands start shaking so badly the glasses on his tray click against each other. Youngie doesn't even look at him. He just flicks 2 fingers, like the man is furniture that moved wrong. Chelsea sets down the glass she's polishing. You don't get to talk to him like that. The lobby goes quiet enough to hear the elevator chime 3 floors up. A manager near the front desk freezes mid-step, like he's trying to decide whether to intervene or pretend he heard nothing at all. One of the bodyguards steps forward. Youngie lifts 2 fingers, and the man stops like he's hit a wall. Youngie studies Chelsea the way a man studies a door he didn't expect to find locked. Do you know who I am? I know you're rude. She doesn't blink. I didn't ask who you were. She picks the glass back up, keeps polishing, doesn't look at him again. The waiter, once the group has moved toward the elevators, mutters a thank you she barely acknowledges. She's not doing it for gratitude. She's doing it because somebody has to. He comes back the next night, and the night after that. If you've ever met someone who challenged you without even trying, drop a comment right now and tell me who that person was for you. And if this is your kind of story, hit like before we go further, because it only gets heavier from here. Nobody at the hotel can explain it. Youngie doesn't wait in lines. He doesn't sit at the bar and order the same drink twice like he's stalling for something. But there he is, Thursday, Friday, Sunday, watching the woman who told him off like he was a valet who forgot the car. By the second week, the other staff have started noticing too. One of the bellhops jokes that Chelsea's got the most dangerous man in Seoul wrapped around a cocktail napkin. Chelsea doesn't laugh. He's a customer, she says. That's all. He sends flowers with her name on the card. She gives them to housekeeping before her shift ends. He has an apartment delivered, the deed, the keys, a handwritten note. She mails the deed back with a sticky note stuck to the front page. Not interested. He sends a car next, waiting outside her building for a week straight, driver included, in case she ever needs a ride anywhere. She takes the bus instead, walking right past the tinted windows without a glance. His assistant asks him, carefully, if he wants to redirect his energy elsewhere. There are easier women, safer ones, women who understand what it means when a man like him shows interest. Youngie doesn't answer. He just asks for Chelsea's schedule for the following week. When he finally corners her, not threatening, just there, waiting by the staff exit like he has nowhere else on earth to be, he asks outright, "What do you want from me?" Chelsea almost laughs. "Nothing. That's the part you can't figure out." She walks past him into the night. He stands there a long time before he leaves. One of his men, watching from the car, has never seen him stand still that long for anyone, not for a business deal, not for a threat, not for anything. 2 weeks later, he shows up without the entourage. No bodyguards, no car idling outside. Just him in a plain jacket, standing across the street from the coffee shop where she buys her morning drink. "You're alone," she says, surprised despite herself. "You keep telling me I don't know what to do with people who want nothing from me." He shrugs, awkward in a way that looks foreign on him. "I figured I'd start by showing up like I'm nobody." It's the first time she really looks at him. Not the reputation. Just the man standing there, uncertain, out of his depth in a way his empire never lets him be. "1 coffee," she says. "That's it." Word travels fast in his world. Within days, half of Seoul's underworld knows that Youngie Cho, the man who once had a rival's entire distribution network dismantled over a broken agreement, is sitting in coffee shops like a teenager, working up the nerve to ask someone to a dance. A few of his rivals find it useful information. A few of his own men find it worrying. His uncle, the man who first pulled him into the business after his father's death, corners him at a family gathering. "You're distracted," his uncle says. "Distraction gets men like us killed." "I'm not distracted," Youngie says. I'm paying attention to something that isn't business for once. His uncle doesn't like the answer. Youngie doesn't care whether he likes it. One coffee becomes a habit neither of them names out loud. Every Tuesday, same corner, same order, his black, hers with too much cream, which he teases her about every single time like it's a fresh discovery. He tells her, weeks in, that most people who spend time with him are either afraid of him or trying to use him, and he stopped being able to tell the difference. Chelsea doesn't answer right away. She just keeps stirring her coffee, unbothered, like his confession doesn't require a performance of sympathy. I'm neither, she finally says, so maybe stop waiting for me to be. It's such a small thing to say. It rearranges something in him anyway. It takes 3 months before she lets him buy her coffee more than once. 6 before she asks him a real question. Your father, she says, what happened to him? Youngie's jaw tightens before his voice does anything. Someone he trusted. That's all he gives her. It's enough. She doesn't push further, and something about the way she doesn't push seems to loosen something behind his ribs, a knot he's been carrying since he was 9 years old and watched his mother's face when the police came to the door. Over the following weeks, she learns him in pieces. The way he checks every exit in a room before he sits down. The way he flinches, just barely, at raised voices that aren't even aimed at him. The empire he built wasn't ambition. It was armor stitched together out of a boy who learned that trust gets people killed. She meets one of his oldest associates by accident, a man who's known him since he was a teenager running numbers for his uncle. The man looks at Chelsea like she's a ghost. He's never brought anyone around before, the man says. Not once, not in 20 years. Chelsea doesn't know what to do with that information, so she files it away and doesn't mention it to Youngie. She doesn't excuse the things he's done to build his empire, but she stops being afraid of the man underneath it. One night, in his kitchen, a kitchen he's never once cooked in, she hands him a knife and tells him to cut the onions properly, not like he's dismembering an enemy. He laughs, actually laughs. It surprises him more than it surprises her. You're the only place I don't feel like a monster, he tells her later, quiet, like it cost him something to say out loud. Chelsea doesn't answer with words. She just doesn't leave. For months, it stays like that, ordinary, almost boring in the way that only people who have survived chaos know how to appreciate. Grocery runs, bad movies, him falling asleep on her shoulder during a documentary about coral reefs, of all things, the most powerful man in Seoul snoring through a nature special like a tired old dog. There's a weekend trip to the coast, his first real vacation in years, where he spends an entire afternoon trying and failing to skip stones while she laughs at him from a blanket in the sand. He doesn't check his phone once. His security detail, 2 cars back, has never seen him go that long without checking it. She starts thinking maybe this is what it looks like when a hard man finally gets soft in the right hands. She's wrong, but not yet, not for a while. There's a night, close to the 1-year mark, when he takes her to meet his mother, something he's never done, not once, with anyone. His mother studies Chelsea across the dinner table for almost the entire meal before she finally speaks. He used to be a soft child, his mother says, like it's a confession. Before everything, I haven't seen it in him for a long time. I see it, Chelsea says. His mother looks at her son, then back at Chelsea, and something in her expression loosens for the first time in years. Later that night, in the car, Youngie is quieter than usual. She hasn't liked anyone I've brought around, he says, because I've never brought anyone around. I know, Chelsea says. She told me. He laughs, surprised, and reaches for her hand at a red light like it's the most natural thing he's ever done. Then his phone buzzes at 2 a.m., and everything about his face changes. Photographs, bank transfers, encrypted messages, supposedly between Chelsea and the T organization, his father's killers, his oldest enemy on Earth. Dates that line up, conveniently, with nights she told him she was working late. A voice memo, garbled, that sounds enough like her to plant a thought and let it grow roots on its own. He sits on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the phone like it might change what it's showing him. Beside him, Chelsea stirs, half asleep. "Come back to bed." He doesn't answer. He gets dressed in the dark instead. He doesn't call her the next morning. He doesn't ask her. He goes straight to rage, because rage is the only language his fear has ever spoken fluently. His head of security tries to slow him down. "Sir, we should verify this first." "I don't need to verify what I can see with my own eyes." "Youngie, think about what you're about to do." He's already walking out the door. She's setting up for the evening shift when he walks into the hotel with the same 6 men from that first night. This time, he doesn't wait for her to notice him. He crosses the lobby and slams the photographs down on the reception counter, right in front of a family checking in with 2 small kids. "Explain this." Chelsea looks down at the images, looks up at him. Something in her face is already breaking, and she hasn't even understood why yet. "Youngie, I don't know what that is." "Don't." His voice doesn't rise. It goes flatter, colder, worse. "Don't stand there and lie to me in front of people who respect me." "I'm not lying. I have never." "You think I don't check?" He's not shouting, but every person in the lobby has stopped breathing normally. The manager who froze the first night is frozen again, one hand halfway to the phone, unsure if he should call anyone. "I checked everything. You've been feeding them information for months." "That's not true. Look at me and ask yourself if that's true." "The apartment is gone by tonight." His voice is a blade with no edge left to sharpen, just cold, flat metal. "Your accounts, your security, all of it. You want to play games with the T family, you can do it without my name protecting you." A young couple checking in tries to quietly wheel their bags toward the elevator, caught in the middle of something that clearly isn't theirs to witness. Nobody moves fast enough to leave without hearing every word. Chelsea's hands are shaking, but her voice isn't. "I never betrayed you. Look at everything we've built over this past year and ask yourself if any of it makes sense with what you're accusing me of." Youngie looks at her like he's trying to find the woman who once told him he didn't have the right to humiliate people. He can't find her anymore. Or maybe he doesn't want to, because finding her means admitting what he's about to do to her. "I should have known someone, like you could never love a man like me." The words land, somewhere Chelsea will carry for years. She doesn't beg. She doesn't cry in front of him, though it costs her everything not to. "One day," she says, "you're going to find out that the woman you destroyed was the only person who never lied to you." Then she walks out, past the men who won't meet her eyes, into a city that suddenly has no place left for her in it. By the time she reaches the street, her legs give out. She sits on the curb for almost an hour before she can make herself stand up and call a friend. Youngie expects her to come back within the week. She doesn't come back at all. If you think he made the biggest mistake of his life in that lobby, put a 1 in the comments right now. If you think there's more to this than what he saw on that phone, put a 2. I want to see where this audience actually stands, because it's about to get worse before it gets better. Subscribe if you're staying for the whole ride. This story does not end where you think it does. The first month, Chelsea sleeps on a friend's couch and doesn't answer when people ask if she's okay. Her friend, Myra, doesn't push. She just leaves tea on the counter and lets Chelsea cry in the bathroom with the fan running so the sound doesn't carry. The second month, she gets a job at a smaller hotel across the city, the kind that doesn't ask questions about resume gaps or why a woman with her skill set is suddenly available for anything. There are nights she sits on the edge of a borrowed bed and replays the lobby in her head, not the accusation, but the moment right before it, when she still thought she knew who he was. That's the part that hurts, not what he took, what she believed. She applies for 11 jobs before one calls her back. She takes it without negotiating the salary, because negotiating requires believing you deserve more, and some days she doesn't. Her new manager, a woman twice her age who's clearly survived a few storms of her own, watches Chelsea work herself to exhaustion in the first few weeks and finally pulls her aside. "Whoever he was," the woman says, not unkindly, "he doesn't get to also take your health." Chelsea doesn't correct her about who he is. She just nods and for the first time since the lobby, lets herself take a full day off without guilt attached to it. It becomes a kind of ritual after that, one day a week where she doesn't think about hotels, or Seoul's underworld, or a man who once told her she wasn't worth loving. She spends those days learning things that have nothing to do with survival. A pottery class. A language app she never finishes. Small, useless, deeply necessary reminders that she's allowed to want things just because she wants them. By the 6th month, she stopped checking her phone for a name that never appears. She starts something of her own the following year, a small hospitality consulting service, built out of everything she learned watching how power actually moves through a room. Her first client is a struggling boutique hotel whose owner takes a chance on her mostly out of pity. She turns their occupancy rate around in 4 months. He becomes her first real reference. It's slow. It's humiliating some days, clients who talk down to her, competitors who assume she's a fluke, men in meetings who address her assistant instead of her until she corrects them, evenly every single time. There are nights she cries over spreadsheets instead of over him, which she decides, privately, counts as progress. There's a night, 2 years in, when a former colleague of Yoongi's recognizes her at a conference and asks, not unkindly, if she's doing all right. Chelsea smiles, says she's better than all right, and means it more than she expects to. There's a specific afternoon, 18 months in, that Chelsea will later point to as the turning point. Not a big one, nothing cinematic. A potential client cancels a contract at the last minute over a rumor about her past with Yoongi, someone having recognized her name from old society pages. She loses the account. She goes home, sits on her kitchen floor, and lets herself feel the full weight of it for exactly 1 hour, timed on her phone. Then she gets up, showers, and starts drafting a new pitch deck for a different client entirely. Myra asks her once if she ever thinks about reaching out to him, just to see. Chelsea considers the question honestly before she answers. If I reach out, she says, it's because I need something from him, and I promised myself I'd never need anything from that man again. 3 years pass like that, not healed exactly, rebuilt board by board on ground she chose herself. By the time her business has a second office and a staff of 11, Chelsea barely thinks of Seoul's most feared man at all. Which is, in its own way, the cruelest thing that could have happened to him. Yoongi's empire doesn't slow down. If anything, it grows, territory expands, rivals fall back. On paper, he's untouchable. But he starts noticing things he never used to notice. How quiet his penthouse is at night. How the women who circle him now all want something, a favor, a connection, a story to tell later. One of them, a designer with a practiced laugh, spends an entire dinner agreeing with everything he says. He sends her home early and doesn't call her again. None of them has ever once told him to stop being cruel to a waiter. He keeps her photo in a drawer he tells himself he doesn't open. He opens it more than he'd ever admit. His mother notices the change in him before anyone else does. She doesn't ask what happened. She just tells him once, over dinner, that his father used to get that same look right before he made a decision he'd regret for the rest of his life. Yoongi doesn't respond to that, but he doesn't forget it either. It's one of his men, going through old T family servers during an unrelated raid, who finds it. Buried 3 folders deep, mislabeled on purpose. The photos were doctored. The bank transfers were routed through shell accounts built specifically to resemble hers. The voice memo was spliced together from 3 unrelated recordings, stitched with enough skill to fool a man who wanted to believe the worst. And buried further in, the part that breaks something in his chest he didn't know still worked, is proof that during the exact weeks he accused her of betraying him, Chelsea had been quietly feeding him warnings through an intermediary, trying to protect him from an assassination attempt she'd overheard being planned. She wasn't working against him. She was the reason he was still alive. He reads the file twice, then a third time, like the words might rearrange themselves into something less devastating. They don't. He sits alone in his office until the sun comes up, the same way she once sat alone on a curb outside a hotel that used to be his. He calls his head of security in at dawn, the same man who tried to stop him 3 years earlier. "You were right," Youngie says. "I should have listened." The man doesn't say "I told you so." He just nods once and asks what Youngie wants to do about it. "I want to find every person who touched this file," Youngie says, "and then I want to find her." He spends the next several days unraveling exactly how deep the deception went, which of his own men had been paid to look the other way, which contact inside T leadership had orchestrated the timing down to the hour. It's methodical, controlled fury, nothing like the reckless anger that walked into that hotel lobby 3 years earlier. He's learned, somewhere in the wreckage, the difference between the two. It takes him 5 weeks to find her. When he finally does, she's stepping out of a building with her name on the directory, laughing at something a colleague said, wearing a confidence that has nothing to do with him and everything to do with what she built without him. She sees him across the street and doesn't flinch. "Chelsea." "Youngie," she says his name like a fact, not a wound. "You look older." "I know the truth." His voice is unsteady in a way none of his enemies have ever heard. "About the evidence, about what you were doing for me, I know everything." "I know you do." She adjusts the strap of her bag, unhurried. "It took you long enough." "How long have you known that I'd find out?" "I didn't know if you ever would." She finally looks at him fully. "I stopped waiting for it a long time ago." He waits for her to scream. Some part of him wants her to. It would be easier than this stillness. "I don't hate you anymore," she says instead. Somehow that costs him more than hatred would have. "Can you forgive me?" "No." He nods, like he expected exactly that. "Not yet," she adds, and walks away before he can decide what to do with the sentence she left hanging in the air between them. He doesn't send gifts this time. He doesn't send an apartment. He shows up publicly and tells a room full of people who matter to his reputation that he humiliated an innocent woman on nothing but manufactured lies. Some of them look at him differently after that. He lets them. He restores what he took, the money, the standing, the years he can't actually give back, and doesn't ask for anything in return. When Chelsea tells him she needs space, he gives it to her. Fully. No men watching from across the street. No protection she didn't ask for. It's the first time in his life he's chosen someone else's boundary over his own instinct to control the outcome. Months later, when an old rival makes a move against her new business, Youngie finds out before she does. He has the means to end the threat in an afternoon. A phone call, a name crossed off a list, the kind of solution he's used his whole life. He doesn't make the call. He tells her instead and lets her decide what she wants done. She's quiet for a long moment, studying him like she's checking for the old version of him underneath the new one. "If you really love me," she says, "don't become a monster for me." He actually listens. That's the moment Chelsea starts believing something might have genuinely changed. Not because he said so, because he did the harder thing, the thing that cost him control instead of blood. The penance doesn't stop there. He spends an entire Saturday helping her move a storage unit's worth of boxes into her new office, sweating through a dress shirt, while 2 of his former bodyguards stand outside looking baffled by the sight of their boss carrying furniture. He learns her new manager's name, her new team's names, the name of the barista at the coffee shop near her office, small things, but things he never once bothered to learn about anyone before her. One evening he shows up at her office uninvited, and for one cold second she thinks it's starting all over again, the same possessiveness dressed up in new clothes. Then she sees what he's carrying, not flowers, not jewelry, but a stack of paperwork. "I signed over my stake in 3 subsidiaries," he says, "to a fund that supports women starting businesses in this city. I wanted you to see it before I filed it, in case you wanted to say no." "Why would I say no?" "Because I did it for you," he says, "and I need to know if that's still a problem between us." She studies him for a long moment, checking, the way she always does now, for the old version of him hiding underneath the new one. She doesn't find it. "It's not a problem," she says, "as long as you'd have done it whether I said yes or no." "I would have." She believes him. They start spending time together again after that. slowly. Coffee first, the way it began, then dinner, then a night where she doesn't go home at all and neither of them makes a production of it. It isn't seamless. There's an evening a few weeks in when Chelsea gets a call from a former colleague of his, someone who once looked at her like she was disposable, and the sound of the man's voice sends her back to that lobby so fast she has to sit down. Youngie finds her like that, pale, gripping the counter. "What happened?" "Nothing happened," she says. "That's the problem. I heard his voice, and for a second I was standing right back in that hotel." He doesn't try to fix it. He just sits down on the floor next to her, back against the cabinets, and waits until her breathing evens out. "I'm not going anywhere," he says. "Not tonight, not when it's hard." It's a small promise. It's also the first one he's ever kept without being asked to prove it. Afterward, once her breathing settles, she tells him something she's never said out loud before, that the hardest part of the years apart wasn't missing him. It was catching herself, some mornings, agreeing with the version of herself he'd left behind. The one who wondered if maybe she really wasn't worth loving. "I hate that I gave you that kind of power over how I saw myself," she says. "I hate that I used it," he answers. "Both things can be true. I don't expect you to forget either one." She doesn't, but she also doesn't carry it alone anymore, and that turns out to matter more than she expected. The tea organization isn't finished, though. Enemies like that rarely are, and this story isn't done breaking your heart before it puts it back together. So if you haven't already, now's a good time to hit that subscribe button, because what happens next is the reason people can't stop watching stories like this one. They take her outside her own office, in daylight, in front of a security camera that catches everything except her face, once the men force her into the car. Youngie gets the call 20 minutes later. For one long second, the old version of him, the one who solves every problem with blood, comes roaring back to the surface. His men have never seen him move that fast, phones out, cars already circling 3 separate districts before he's even finished giving the order. Then he gets a second call. "Chelsea," from a stranger's phone, breathless, alive. "I'm fine, I got out." She disarmed one of them with a fire extinguisher and talked her way past the other one using 3 years of negotiation training and a level of calm that terrifies even her afterward. By the time Youngie arrives at the address she gives him, she's sitting on a curb with a stolen phone and a split lip, entirely unbothered by his men swarming the scene around her. He drops to his knees in front of her without thinking, checking her face, her hands, like he needs to verify with his own eyes that she's whole. "I didn't need you." She's not unkind about it, just honest. "I chose to call you anyway, that's different." He understands, for the first time, exactly how different it is. He insists on driving her home anyway, and she lets him, mostly because her hands are still shaking too hard to trust behind a wheel. Neither of them talks for the first 10 minutes. Finally, at a red light, he asks the question that's been sitting in his chest since the phone call. "What if you hadn't gotten out?" Chelsea looks at the split skin on her knuckles, still raw from the fire extinguisher. "Then I hope you would have burned their whole organization down and not felt a single second of guilt about it." "I would have." "I know." She looks over at him. "That's exactly why I made sure I got out first." He almost laughs, but it catches somewhere in his throat instead, turning into something closer to relief. At her apartment, she doesn't invite him in, but she doesn't send him away either. They sit on the front steps in silence until the adrenaline finally drains out of her enough to sleep. The T family sends one final message: her or everything he's built. 3 years ago, there wouldn't have been a decision to make. His empire would have won without a second thought, and he wouldn't have lost a night's sleep over it. Youngie dismantles half his own operation to burn out the threat entirely, handing off territory, cutting ties, giving up more power in 6 weeks than his father ever gave up in a lifetime. His people think he's lost his mind. Some accuse him, quietly at first and then not so quietly, of letting a woman unravel everything 3 generations of his family built. In a meeting that turns into something close to a mutiny, one of his oldest lieutenants asks him outright if a woman is really worth the empire his father built. My father's empire got him killed, Youngie says. I'm not interested in the same ending. Some of them leave. He lets them. The T family doesn't go quietly. There's a final standoff, not the kind with guns drawn in a warehouse, but the slower, more grinding kind. Leaked information, a smear campaign aimed at Chelsea's business, an attempt to turn what's left of his own organization against him. Youngie meets every move with something none of his enemies expect from him, restraint paired with precision. He doesn't retaliate with force. He starves them of resources, cuts their remaining allies loose one by one, and lets the weight of their own greed finish what he started. It takes 4 months. By the end of it, the T name means nothing in Seoul anymore, and Youngie didn't have to become the man Chelsea asked him not to become in order to get there. There's one moment, near the end, when the last surviving T lieutenant is brought before him, expecting the kind of ending Youngie's reputation has always promised. Youngie looks at the man for a long time. 3 years ago, I would have killed you for less than what you did to us, he says. I'm not that man tonight. He has the man handed over to the authorities instead, along with enough evidence to bury him legally for the rest of his life. His own men don't know what to make of it. Neither, honestly, does he, but it's the first time in his life a decision like that has felt like strength instead of weakness. Chelsea watches him do it without being asked, and understands, finally, that love was never supposed to be about who owns who. I thought losing you would teach me how much I loved you, he tells her one evening, voice unsteady in a way she's never heard from him. It taught me something worse. What? That I was the one who made you believe you weren't worth loving. Chelsea doesn't say anything for a long moment. It's the wound she's carried longer than she carried his name, longer than the humiliation in that lobby, longer than the years alone. He's finally found it without her having to say it out loud. He isn't apologizing for himself anymore. He's apologizing because he finally understands what it cost her. She doesn't come back to him right away. She makes him wait, the way he once made her wait outside a locked door he never opened for her. He doesn't fight the waiting. He fills it instead, rebuilding what's left of his organization into something closer to a legitimate business, spending actual time with his mother, learning, slowly, how to be a person who isn't defined entirely by leverage and consequence. He's not doing it to win Chelsea back. He tells himself that, and eventually he believes it. He's doing it because he doesn't want to be the man from that lobby ever again, whether she takes him back or not. There are setbacks. A night she pulls away without explanation, and he has to learn, for the first time in his life, not to chase. A morning she shows up at his door anyway, unannounced, just to prove to herself she still can. Eventually, though, on a quiet evening with no cameras and no empire watching, she takes his hand. You were the only woman who ever loved me without wanting anything from me, he says. And you were the only man who ever made me find out how strong I could be after I lost everything. He kisses her forehead, not like something he's claiming, like something he's grateful was ever willing to stay in the same room as him at all. There's no extravagant wedding, no press, just the two of them years later in a small courtyard with a handful of people who actually know them, Myra crying harder than the bride. Youngie's mother sits in the front row, watching her son the way she hasn't been able to watch him in decades, without worry etched into every line of her face. His old head of security, the one who tried to stop him that first terrible night, stands near the back, arms crossed, allowing himself something close to a smile. He's the only one who fully understands the distance between the man who once slammed photographs onto a reception counter and the one standing here now, hands trembling slightly as he waits for Chelsea to walk toward him. Years after that, when he walks into a room and every person in it stands out of habit, his eyes go straight past all of them. They find her first. They always find her first now. Sometimes, at the end of the night, when the guests have gone, and it's just the two of them cleaning up glasses that don't need cleaning yet, Chelsea catches him watching her the way he did that very first night, like he still can't quite believe she stayed in the room instead of walking out of it. What? She asks every time. Nothing, he says every time. just remembering that you almost didn't give me the time of day." "I almost didn't," she agrees. "You're lucky I have a weakness for men who need to be told the truth. I'm not that man anymore." "No," she says and means it. "You're not." Then, quieter, almost to herself, "Neither am I not the woman who thought she needed you to save her. I like who I became without you a lot more than I ever expected to." The most feared man in Seoul spent his whole life believing power was the thing that made him worth loving. It was the humility that finally did. And somewhere in that quiet courtyard, years after a lobby full of strangers watched him destroy her, Chelsea finally understands the full shape of what she survived, not just his cruelty, but her own refusal to disappear because of it. She didn't just get her life back. She built a better one, on her own terms, and let him earn a place in it only after he proved, over and over, that he understood the difference between owning someone and choosing them. That's the story worth telling. Not that a powerful man finally loved a woman enough to change, but that a woman loved herself enough to make him. If this story hit you somewhere, tell me in the comments which moment got you the most, the lobby, the reunion, or the ending. Hit like if Chelsea deserved better before she ever got it, and subscribe for more stories exactly like this one, every single week.